Good afternoon. I'm here to talk to you today about the role of transportation in creating sustainable cities. And I think a lot of you are going to be expecting that here's a TransLink guy who's going to come and tell us about how building trains everywhere and putting bus lines everywhere is going to save the world. The birds will sing, the bees will buzz. But what I really want to do is call into question a lot of our conventional wisdoms about transportation and transit, and really think about the role of land use in making transportation successful. So what I'd like to do is, for those of you that are new to our region, tell you a little bit about what TransLink's role is in shaping sustainable communities. And when I talk about transportation and its role in helping to achieve good transport outcomes, I think we typically think about reducing driving, getting more people to walk, bike, and take transit. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on a little bit here. But most importantly, what I want to emphasize is that transit alone is not enough, that it's an important part of the solution, but there's a lot more that's going to deliver those outcomes that we're looking for. And the key to this is that a good transportation plan is a good land use plan. So our role, a lot of people think that TransLink is the bus company, but it's more than just that. And we have a pretty broad modal scope. We have responsibility for roads and bridges. We've just constructed a bridge in the past few years linking Maple Ridge with the south of Fraser community. And we have a cycling mandate as well as a mandate for a range of programs that help manage the system more effectively. But we're more than just providing the stuff, and what's really important about TransLink's mandate is it's quite unique in Canada. Just a show of hands, how many people here over the past 3 to 5 days have just walked and not taken any other mode? Okay, good show. How many people have only cycled and not done anything else? Okay, how many people have just driven? Okay, so how many people have taken a combination of those modes? And that reflects the need for a mandate for an organization to look at the issues more broadly than just a cycling issue, a walking issue, or a transit issue, to pull it all together into one comprehensive planning framework. But most importantly, TransLink has a mandate to do more than just provide the stuff. We have a mandate to really support a broader set of regional objectives around economy, environment, and sustainability. And so when we look at our strategy development, there are a whole range of things that we typically try to do to deliver an effective transportation system. There's 6 of them listed here. And our first port of call is integrating land use with transport, because that's where we feel we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. Just a few facts and figures about the relationship. A lot of you have seen some of these figures before, but I think it's worth emphasizing just to put things into perspective. And looking at the relationships between the level of car use and urban density, there's a very clear, unmistakable relationship. The more dense the urban region, the less driving occurs in that region. And so a sample of Canadian and US cities, you can see very clearly that the more dense of urban regions, the lower the levels of vehicle kilometers traveled in that region. And if you look at the US cities as the extreme, you see Atlanta and Houston, very low levels of urban density and very high levels of driving. Looking very specifically at some outcomes here recently, some positive trends in the downtown core in particular, corresponding to a very significant increase in population in the downtown and employment in the downtown, significant reductions in automobile use, increases in transit, walking, and cycling. And to move those figures, even 1 percentage point, is a Herculean task, very significant level of effort required to do that. That's all on the backs of improved land use. During that period, very little new transit supply coming into the downtown, very significant increases in walking and cycling. The part of the story that you're not seeing here is what's happening in the areas around the city of Vancouver, and the trends moving in the opposite direction. Very significant increases in population, dispersal of those jobs and people, and an increase in driving. Transit supply is very important, but it's not enough. And this just is a plot of all the SkyTrain stations on the Expo and Millennium lines here in Vancouver, and the share of walking, cycling, and transit on this axis. Sorry, the text doesn't come up very well. But you can see that Burrard Station at the extreme over here, very high population and employment density, very high mode share by walking, cycling, and transit. And at the other end, Braid and Lake City stations, very low population densities, and very low mode shares for walking, cycling, and transit. These all have very, very high levels of rapid transit access. Another important part of the puzzle here is looking at what other successful cities do and the role of walking and cycling in that success. And if you look at some major European cities and the levels of success in getting low levels of automobile usage in those cities, you see very high levels of transit use. The yellow bar there is a very, very high level by international standards. Vancouver's at about 10 or 11% of a mode share by transit. But what you do see in those cities is the majority of the success is, the heavy lifting is being done by walking and cycling. And so what is it about those cities that helps to deliver those kind of outcomes? Twice the number of people walking and cycling than taking transit. If you look at those cities, they don't have remarkably dense downtowns. They have very moderately dense cities, very even distribution of those densities, a good mix of uses throughout the urban region. So what is it that we can learn from that as a region to help deliver better outcomes here? And so what is a transit-oriented community? Well, it's not so much about transit. They're walking and cycling communities that are served by high-quality transit. So we've been doing a lot of thinking about this at TransLink and trying to create a framework for us to do good transportation planning, but recognizing the limited role that we have in doing so, and have created a framework that municipalities can use and that TransLink can use for guiding its investment around articulating what are the 6 essential elements that we'd look for in creating a sustainable community, and that would help us to decide what level of transportation service that we provide. So it's about destinations, distance, design, density, diversity, and demand. I'll just quickly walk through each of the 6. So in terms of level of importance, there's a recognition that some of them are more important than others, and particularly the ones that are more permanent in nature. So getting your destinations right is particularly important because you can't move a downtown. You can't move a suburban town center. So that's the first area where we need to look to get decisions made early and to get the right decisions made. So looking at the different elements, linking transportation to those destinations is critical. A land use plan is a good place to start, and a lot of those things are dictated by sort of the historical development of a city. So to the best extent that we can, we take advantage of those opportunities where they arise. In the city of Vancouver, it's built around the streetcar neighborhood, so there's a lot of good stuff to work with there. In suburban communities, we need to use transportation as an opportunity to shape where those communities develop. And so having an idea of where they should go and servicing them by high-quality transportation corridors is critically important. So just in terms of looking at a good design and a bad design, just in terms of making them easy to service, low cost, reducing travel times, the kind of design that you want to look at is the one on the right-hand side. That's a good transit geography, having multiple destinations in a straight line so that you can have a good, productive transportation system. For transit service, it means lots of people getting on and off a bus or a train rather than having people go from one point to another distant point and no turnover in usage. And obviously, if you have the design on the left, it's a lot of circuitous travel. In terms of some successes, we can see that the Millennium lines and the Expo lines, you can see a lot of towers appearing. So there has been some success in guiding some development. There's certainly a lot more that can be done. Distance, having the cul-de-sac pattern obviously involves a lot more walking to get to a transit stop or to your local coffee shop. So having that kind of design reflected in your neighborhood street pattern is critically important. Just a couple of things that we've been trying to do locally with some projects working very closely with the city of Surrey, for example. We've been trying to squeeze a downtown into a suburbs body. So for those of you that have been to Surrey Central, you can see that we've got some towers emerging, but we've got these vast tracts of suburban strip malls that are with a very large block pattern. Very bold ambitions for developing it as a town center. And so what we propose to do with the city of Surrey is to try to break that grid up again to shorten some of those travel times. In terms of design, bringing forward some of the development, instead of having the sea of parking in advance of development, bringing that development to the forefront of the street, having those be a little bit more walkable and serviceable by transit. And then putting a little bit of spice in it, as Mr. Panalosa said, and adding a little bit of bringing transit to the heart of the community, adding a bit more of the design flair to that. Density is critically important, but we don't need the kind of hyper-density that you see in Tokyo, for example. This is 200 people per hectare on average throughout the region. Copenhagen's a good model, but that's been developed over hundreds of years. Falls Creek here delivers very, very high population densities, but we need to do that more evenly throughout the region. We can't just have that happen in very small pockets in the central area of the city. We have to see that happen more broadly in the urban region to get the kind of outcomes that we're looking for. And it can happen on a very simple scale in a neighborhood context, where you can have coach houses in the back of lots, retaining the neighborhood context. But this doesn't work. This is a street in Burnaby that's actually a lot of redevelopment's been happening there recently, and still no sidewalks. Coming to the last two of the 60s, again, only 25% of trips are actually work-oriented trips. The remaining 75% of them are for everything else. Recreation, shopping, going to the library, for example. And so we really need to focus on those trips. So getting that rich mix of uses helps to make those very short trips viable by walking and cycling. And then finally, sending the pricing signals. And you get obviously different decisions when you have to pay for parking than when it's free. And this very simply shows the relationship between supply, which is actually a proxy for price in Canadian central business districts. You can see that the higher levels of central business district stalls per 1,000 employees means lower percent of commuters that are taking transit and non-motorized transit, walking and cycling. So a very clear, unmistakable relationship between those. Toronto's downtown gets a remarkable 70% by transit, walking and cycling. So just some quick conclusions. The greatest benefits are to take a comprehensive approach, get it right and get it right early. And most importantly, first step is to create environments where walking and cycling can naturally succeed, and that the transit will follow naturally. Thank you.